It looks like Lil Jeff's affiliates have finally avenged his death. Word on the street is that Trap City Rob, the man responsible, was just brutally killed behind bars.
They stood over him, man, 17 times to the chest.
Sources say he was tortured into confessing before the hit went down. I've got all the details. Let's get into it. Lil Jeff's killer behind bars. Talks of Trap City Rob getting killed in jail are spreading fast online. And while some think it's a stretch, let's be real, it's not that hard to believe. From the very beginning, Lil Jeff's father made it crystal clear that this wasn't going to end with a funeral. When your son gets gunned down in broad daylight, you don't just move on and act like nothing happened. The old man took to Facebook with the kind of raw emotion only a father who lost his child to the streets could express. He declared that the saga continues and demanded everyone clear the streets. These weren't just emotional words from a grieving parent. This was a declaration of war. A promise that the Bloodhound family wasn't about to let their fallen soldier's death go unanswered. But Pops wasn't the only one keeping that same energy. Q50, Lil Jeff's right-hand man and closest affiliate in the Bloodhound crew, had been moving differently since his boy got taken out. The streets were whispering about how Q50 was plotting, how he was ready to spin the block and make sure Trap City felt the same pain they had inflicted. It was exactly how Lil Jeff had threatened his ops with revenge before his own death.
Public service announcement. On my dead grandmother's head, if I'm lying, I'm down. God could come pull me out this car right now. A never took a dollar from me.
That wasn't just posturing, that was a code, a tradition within the Bloodhound circle. Loyalty, retaliation, and legacy. And when it came to Q50, people close to him said he was ready to die for it. Losing Jeff didn't break him, it sharpened him. It turned him into a man with one focus: revenge. The beef between Bloodhound and Trap City hadn't just started yesterday. It had been bubbling beneath the surface for months. Shootings, threats, cryptic Instagram posts, all signs that war was around the corner. And when Lil Jeff got taken out, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before things boiled over. So now, hearing that Trap City Rob might have been killed inside, it doesn't feel far-fetched. If anything, it feels like the next step in a deadly cycle. Ironically, Trap City Rob had earned the nickname Defensive Player of the Year after the shooting. Fans saw his actions as defending his turf from an armed threat, but all that respect meant nothing behind bars. Jail is its own ecosystem. And now, the same streets that once hyped Rob up were whispering about his downfall. Rob had been picked up by police shortly after the shooting. Everyone thought the murder charge would stick, but after reviewing footage and testimonies, authorities ruled the incident either self-defense or mutual combat. In the eyes of the law, it didn't qualify as murder. But the thing is, legal justice and street justice don't operate on the same clock. The courts might have let him slide, but to the Bloodhounds, the scales were still wildly unbalanced, and they were ready to even them out by any means necessary. Even with the murder charges dropped, Rob wasn't exactly off the hook. He was still a convicted felon found with a firearm, and that alone carried weight. The system had him marked as an armed habitual criminal, so regardless of whether the killing was justified, he was facing serious prison time. That landed Rob in the worst place possible, locked up, vulnerable, and surrounded by men who might carry a grudge or be loyal to the Bloodhounds. Jail isn't just bars and routine, it's politics, alliances, and silent tension. And when you're tied to the killing of a respected figure in the drill scene, your name doesn't make you safe, it makes you a target. To understand how we got here, you've got to rewind to that violent summer day that changed everything. June 8, 2024 started like any other day in the trenches, but it ended with one of the most notorious figures in the Bloodhound crew laid out on the concrete, his dreams of rap stardom and street dominance extinguished in a hail of gunfire. The incident occurred while Lil Jeff was allegedly attempting to carry out what the streets call a drill, essentially hunting down an opponent in enemy territory. Video footage of the incident reportedly showed Lil Jeff, armed and aggressive, attempting to enter a home where his target was hiding. But this wasn't some defenseless victim cowering behind a door. This was Trap City territory, and they weren't about to let an enemy just walk up in their space without consequences. When Lil Jeff made his move, he had no idea he was walking into a situation where his intended victim was ready and willing to defend himself by any means necessary. The aftermath was brutal and final. Lil Jeff was shot multiple times, with reports indicating he took somewhere between 17 to 19 bullets.
They stood over him, man, 17 times to the chest. The autopsy came out. 17 times. You see how little he was, Fly? To take 17 bullets? 19 bullets?
For a young man who had built his reputation on being the aggressor, being the one who caught his enemies slipping, this role reversal was as shocking as it was definitive. The streets that had made him a legend also became the place where his legend came to an abrupt and violent end. The police found approximately 45 shell casings at the scene, indicating just how intense and chaotic the final moments had been. This wasn't a quick pop and drop situation. This was a sustained engagement that left no doubt about the intentions of everyone involved. When the smoke cleared and the sirens faded, Lil Jeff Jeff was gone, and the drill scene had lost one of its most controversial and prolific figures. But here's the thing about street wars. Death is never the end. It's just the start of the next chapter. The only questions that remain are, when will payback come? Where will it hit? And how much blood will it cost? And judging by what's being whispered now, that payback may have just landed inside a jail cell. So how did we get here? Lil Jeff's death sparked the deadliest feud, from chain snatching to body dropping. Every legendary beef in hip-hop history starts with something that seems minor from the outside looking in. But in the streets, respect and reputation are everything, and the smallest slight can snowball into a war that claims multiple lives before it's all said and done. The feud between the Bloodhound crew and Trap City wasn't born from some deep-rooted territorial dispute or generational hatred. It started with something as simple as jewelry. But in the drill scene, taking someone's chain is basically declaring war on their entire existence. The whole situation kicked off in early 2023, when Lil Jeff, representing the Bloodhound Drill City faction, made a move that would set off a chain reaction of violence that wouldn't stop until multiple bodies hit the ground. He didn't just steal Carter Varvel's chain, he disrespected everything that man stood for, snatched his dignity right along with that piece of jewelry, and basically told the entire Trap City crew that they were soft enough to get robbed without consequences. In street terms, that's not just theft. That's a declaration that you don't see your enemy as a threat worth respecting. But Trap City wasn't about to let that level of disrespect slide without teaching the Bloodhounds a lesson they'd never forget. The response came on March 16, 2023, when Lil Cap from Trap City caught Z-Money, a respected member of the Drill City crew, and put him in the dirt permanently. This wasn't just retaliation. This was an escalation that transformed a simple robbery into a blood feud that would consume both crews for over a year. Z-Money wasn't just any random affiliate. He was family to Lil Jeff, and his death would become the fuel that drove Jeff's transformation from a regular street dude into a killing machine with an insatiable thirst for revenge. The death of Z-Money hit Lil Jeff like a freight train loaded with pure rage and determination. This wasn't just about a chain anymore. This was about avenging family, about proving that the Bloodhounds weren't going to be pushed around by some crew that thought they could just murder their people without facing consequences. The streets were about to witness Lil Jeff's evolution from a chain-snatching opportunist into a calculated killer who would rack up bodies faster than most people change their clothes. June 25th, 2023 marked the next major escalation when Lil Jeff teamed up with his right-hand man Q50, caught Layal from Trap City lacking and sent him to meet his maker. But this wasn't just about evening the score. This was about sending a message that the Bloodhounds were ready to match Trap City's energy and then some. Layal's death proved that Lil Jeff wasn't playing around anymore. He was fully committed to this path of violence, and anyone affiliated with Trap City was fair game in his mind. The summer of 2023 became a season of humiliation and violence that would further cement the hatred between these two crews. Lil Jeff took his disrespect game to another level when he caught Big Motion from Trap City and not only forced him to say Layal on camera, but then knocked him out cold for the whole internet to see. This wasn't just about violence anymore. This was about psychological warfare, about breaking down his enemy's mental state and proving that Trap City members could be made to look weak and submissive whenever he felt like making it happen. But Lil Jeff wasn't satisfied with just embarrassing his enemies. He wanted them dead, and he was willing to put in the work to make that happen. August 31st, 2023 became another date marked in blood when Lil Jeff and Q50 caught Glenn from Trap City and unleashed 15 rounds into his body. 15 shots isn't just about making sure someone doesn't survive. That's about sending a message of complete and utter disrespect, about showing that you have so much ammunition and so little regard for your enemy's life that you're willing to waste bullets just to make a point. Trap City couldn't let that level of aggression go unanswered, and they proved they were still in this war when they caught Q50, Lil Jeff's closest partner in crime, and lit him up with over 10 shots in the fall of 2023. The fact that Q50 survived that encounter was nothing short of miraculous, but it also served as a warning shot that Trap City wasn't backing down despite the losses they had taken. They were willing to go toe-to-toe with the Bloodhounds, and they had the firepower and determination to make this a war of attrition that would test everyone's resolve. The violence continued to escalate when the Bloodhounds retaliated by shooting T3 from Trap City, proving that this feud had taken on a life of its own, with each crew trying to outdo the other in terms of brutality and body count. What had started as a chain snatching had evolved into an all-out war where nobody was safe, where affiliations meant everything, and where the only currency that mattered was violence and the willingness to use it without hesitation or remorse. The personal nature of this beef made it even more dangerous than your typical territorial dispute. This wasn't just about corner or drug spots. This was about pride, family, and the kind of deep-seated hatred that only comes from watching your friends and family members get gunned down by people you see as inferior. Every death on either side added fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control, and both crews seemed determined to keep feeding that flame until there was nobody left standing. The culture of diss tracks and social media media taunting made everything worse, with both sides constantly disrespecting their fallen enemies and bragging about their own violent achievements. This wasn't just street beef anymore. This was entertainment for the drill music community, with fans picking sides and celebrating violence as if it were some kind of sporting event. The more outrageous and disrespectful the content became, the more views and attention it generated, creating a feedback loop that incentivized even more extreme behavior. Lil Jeff, in particular, had mastered the art of turning his real-life violence into online content that would boost his reputation in both the streets and the music industry. He understood that in the drill scene, authenticity meant everything, and the more bodies you could claim, the more respect you could command. His social media presence became a running commentary on his alleged murder spree, with him regularly updating his body count and bragging about his latest victims. This wasn't just criminal behavior. This was criminal behavior turned into a brand, with death and destruction serving as the foundation for his growing fame. The psychological impact of this constant violence and disrespect cannot be understated. Both crews were operating under tremendous stress, knowing that any day could be their last, that any trip to the store or visit to a friend's house could turn into a deadly ambush. The paranoia and hypervigilance required to survive in this environment would have broken lesser men, but these were individuals who had been shaped by the streets from a young age, who had learned to channel their trauma into aggression and their fear into violence. As the body count continued to rise and the hatred between these crews deepened, it became clear that this feud would only end when one side was completely eliminated or when the authorities finally stepped in with enough force to break the cycle. But in Chicago's drill scene, the authorities were often seen as just another enemy, and the idea of cooperation with law enforcement was viewed as the ultimate betrayal of everything these crews stood for. Lil Jeff's reign of terror, how Chicago's most notorious serial killer racked up bodies. When we talk about serial killers in America, most people think about the Hollywood versions, the calculated psychopaths who stalk their victims for weeks, the methodical madmen who leave cryptic clues for police to follow, or the twisted individuals who kill for some perverted psychological satisfaction. But in Chicago's drill scene, serial killing takes on a completely different character, and Lil Jeff proved that you don't need elaborate schemes or psychological disorders to rack up an impressive body count. Sometimes all you need is beef, bullets, and an absolute disregard for human life. The transformation of Lil Jeff from a regular street dude into what can only be described as a serial killer began with the death of his cousin, Z-Money, and accelerated with each subsequent act of violence. But what made Jeff different from your typical gang member was his systematic approach to murder and his compulsive need to document and brag about his crimes. This wasn't just about defending territory or making money. This was about building a reputation as someone so dangerous and unpredictable that even mentioning his name would send shivers down people's spines. The alleged body count that Lil Jeff accumulated during his relatively short criminal career reads like something out of a crime novel, with law enforcement sources and street intelligence suggesting he was responsible for at least 7 confirmed murders, though he personally claimed responsibility for 11. The fact that he was willing to publicly claim credit for these killings, often through social media posts and music lyrics, demonstrated a level of arrogance and recklessness that would ultimately contribute to his downfall. Leal, whose real name was Jaleal Goins, became one of Jeff's most high-profile victims when he was gunned down on June 25, 2023. But Jeff didn't just kill Leal, he turned his death into a permanent part of his online persona, regularly mocking the deceased and using his name as a punchline in diss tracks and social media posts. This pattern of killing and then publicly disrespecting the dead became Jeff's signature move, a way of ensuring that his victims couldn't rest in peace, even after he had taken their lives. Glenn from Trap City became another notch on Jeff's belt when he was shot 15 times in what can only be described as an act of pure overkill. 15 bullets isn't just about making sure someone dies. That's about sending a message, about demonstrating that you have so much disregard for your enemy's life that you're willing to waste ammunition just to ensure they suffer as much as possible before taking their final breath. The excessive nature of this violence showed that Jeff had moved beyond simply killing for strategic reasons. He was killing because he enjoyed it. But perhaps the most shocking example of Jeff's callous disregard for human life came with the January 26, 2024 shooting at Innovations High School, where 2 young men, Robert Boston, known as Lil Rob, and Monterio Williams, known as Monty, were gunned down in what should have been a safe educational environment. The fact that Jeff allegedly took credit for these murders and used them as bragging material on social media shows just how far he had fallen from any semblance of normal human decency. His social media posts after the school shooting were particularly disturbing, with Jeff claiming to have 10 hats, with the last 2 being graduation caps, a sick reference to the fact that his most recent victims were students. This kind of wordplay might seem clever to someone with a twisted sense of humor, but it represents the complete dehumanization of his victims and the transformation of murder into a game where the only score that matters is how many lives you can take. The killing spree continued with D-Money, a female from Hadaway, Jaro City, who was murdered in October 2023, along with Lil Deuce from Foster Park in what appears to have been a double homicide. The fact that Jeff was willing to kill a woman shows that his violence had no boundaries, no code of ethics that might limit his targets to just rival gang members. In his mind, anyone connected to his enemies was fair game, regardless of their gender, age, or level of involvement in the streets. Lil Pooh from Trap City became another victim in this growing list of casualties, with Jeff reportedly dissing him on social media and hinting at his involvement in the killing. The pattern was always the same: identify a target, eliminate them with extreme prejudice, and then use their death as material for social media content and music that would further enhance his reputation as someone not to be crossed under any circumstances. What made Jeff's killing spree even more disturbing was his apparent enjoyment of the psychological aspects of murder. He didn't just kill his enemies, he would often wait outside their homes, study their routines, and time his attacks for maximum impact and terror. This level of premeditation and stalking behavior showed that Jeff had developed the methodical approach of a true predator, someone who derived satisfaction not just from the act of killing, but from the entire process of hunting and terrorizing his victims. The fact that he regularly updated his body count on social media platforms like Instagram turned murder into a form of entertainment and self-promotion.
You know, Lil Jeff, he was on Instagram Live after he caught his last body, talking about, yo, it's 11 now, we up 11 now.
This wasn't just criminal behavior. This was criminal behavior turned into a brand, with death and destruction serving as the content that would drive engagement and build his following in the drill music community. His music became a running soundtrack to his alleged crimes, with tracks like Ah serving as both confession and celebration of his violent acts.
And then the next thing you know, Jeff's got a song out called Ah. I don't know if you've heard this song, but in the song he says, you know, he was screaming ah when he got hit. And the footage of the kid dying on the ground screaming ah, the self-snitching's just on another level.
The level of self-incrimination in these songs was staggering, with Jeff essentially providing law enforcement with a detailed confession set to a beat. The psychological profile that emerges from studying Jeff's behavior is that of someone who had completely abandoned any pretense of normal human empathy or moral restraint. His willingness to kill children, women, and anyone else he perceived as connected to his enemies showed that he had crossed lines that even hardened criminals typically respect. This wasn't just about gang warfare anymore. This was about a young man who had become addicted to violence and the power that came from being able to take lives without consequences. The fact that he operated with virtual impunity for so long, despite his public confessions and constant bragging about his crimes, speaks to the complex relationship between law enforcement and the drill music community in Chicago. The authorities seemed either unwilling or unable to use his own admissions against him, creating an environment where he felt invincible and increasingly reckless in his behavior. But as we all know, the streets have a way of balancing the scales, and Jeff's reign of terror was destined to come to an end in the same violent manner that had defined his entire adult life. His death on June 8, 2024, while attempting to carry out yet another murder, represented the ultimate irony. The hunter finally becoming the hunted, the predator becoming the prey. After years of dealing death to others, he finally met someone who was willing and able to match his energy and send him to meet the same fate he had inflicted on so many others. The legacy that Lil Jeff left behind is one of senseless violence, destroyed families, and a community terrorized by someone who had completely lost touch with his humanity. His transformation from a young man with potential into a serial killer who terrorized Chicago's South Side serves as a cautionary tale about how quickly someone can fall into a cycle of violence that ultimately consumes everything and everyone around them.